I'd like to start off with our session on the emerging trends in Pakistan related to environmental law. So, as we know that the development of more effective environmental laws and legal systems throughout the world has become critical to directing economic development and growth onto a path of environmental sustainability. Countries are transplanting law and regulatory policy innovations of other nations even when they have very different legal and cultural traditions. Similarly, Pakistan has also issued several legislations, rules, regulations, policies, and strategies. The aim of this session presently would be to draw focus on the emergence and need of environmental law internationally and nationally. Furthermore, we would also like to emphasize and focus on the situation in Pakistan and the applicability and success of environmental law within Pakistan. So I would like to welcome our esteemed panelists, Sir Rafe Alam, Ms. Sara Hayat, Sir Amir Zafar Khan and Sir Ali Ibrahim.
Thank
So,
you.
to introduce them, firstly, we have Sir Rafi Alam, who is an environmental lawyer and activist. In 2013, after practicing for a corporate and constitutional law, he founded Salim Alam and Co., a firm that specializes in the energy, water, natural resources, and urban infrastructure sectors. As one of Pakistan's leading environmental lawyers, Sir Rafi regularly advises the federal and provincial governments, the World Bank, ADB, IFC, and a number of INGOs on issues of policy and strategy in these sectors, and he also provides corporate clients strategic sustainability insights. Mr. Rafe has served as chairman of the board of two public sector utilities, the Lahore Electric Supply Company and the Lahore Waste Management Company. Mr. Rafe also serves as a member of the Pakistan Climate Change Council, the Punjab Environment Protection Council, the Hisar Foundation's Tank on the Rational Use of Water, and as advisor to Air Quality Asia. Next, I would like to welcome Ms. Sara Hayat, who is an experienced lawyer and consultant focusing on climate change law, policy, and advocacy within the field of climate change and gender. She received her first LLM from Durham University, UK, and practiced law in Pakistan for 6 years before securing two fellowships to the University of Michigan, where she studied climate change law. She has consulted on climate change-induced migration in Pakistan for Oxfam International and pioneered a project stressing the nexus between climate change and human rights in Pakistan for Amnesty International. Moreover, Ms. Sara is also a member of Climate Action Pakistan, which organized 39 climate strikes across the country to demand the government to prioritize climate action. Next, I would also like to welcome Sir Amir Zafar Khan, who has a bachelor's degree in both law and business from Middlesex University, London. He has a postgraduate certificate in company law, a postgraduate diploma in company law, and masters of law. Mr. Amir Zafar Khan has done a variety of work with many NGOs and governmental organizations for more than 6 years now, which includes the Royal Norwegian Embassy, Oxford Policy Management, and many teaching institutions. Lastly, I would like to welcome Sir Ali Ibrahim, who is a partner at the firm Kalam Law. He has received an LLM degree from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London. Mr. Ibrahim gained corporate and commercial experience and was also involved in many high-profile commercial, banking, and constitutional litigations and regulatory matters. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists for taking out the time to join us for this session today. Now, to move on to the questions, I would like to ask our moderator, Ms. Shafaq Farooq, to start with the questions, and our esteemed panelists can start answering them. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Amna. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shafaq Farooq, and I'll be moderating the session for the question answers. And I'm very glad that we have such an esteemed panel in front of us. So my first question is, and which is a very asked question, by the way, is that why students should opt to study environmental law? Like, why the study of environmental law is important? So we can work by like anyone can unmute themselves and then anyone can answer, and then we can have others jumping in and giving their suggestions. So
I can take this one to begin with. So basically, I think one of the reasons why the younger lot should take environmental laws more seriously is because I think we don't have much time left insofar as mitigating the effects of climate change and environmental degradations are concerned. And other than that, I think there's a huge scope for younger lot, especially if you're lawyers. There are hardly any lawyers who are pursuing, I think, environmental law practice as it is right now in Pakistan. So I think in that sense, there's a huge scope. You can basically, whether it is the environment, whether it is the climate, whether it's air pollution, water pollution, waste management issues. So there's a lot of scope for the younger lot to work with.
okay, so Ma'am Sara, would you like to please contribute to that?
Yeah, I think Amir more than covered it. And hi, Amir. Hi, Ali. And hi, Arafe. And hello to all of you guys who have organized this. Hi, Shafak. And thank you for inviting us all. I think Amir more than covered it, really. Something I'd like to add is that a lot of students feel like and do enter this profession to make money. And they feel like environmental law is not something that will so to speak, give them very deep pockets. But that's not true. That's not necessarily true. Of course, there are good days and bad days. But, with environmental law, any expertise in this area entitles you to work with policy. It entitles you to work with the government, with organizations, both domestic and international. And then, like Amir said, it's a niche area. We need more people in it. So there's always work to be generated. And then it's such an important issue. The environment is pretty much the most important issue facing us. Even during a pandemic, I'm willing to say this and pass this statement. So it's very, and students must dispel this image that environmental study or work or whatever is just advocacy. It's not. There is proper work involved behind environmental and climate change law and policy regulation. And you must ask Rafi Saab here to comment a little on this because he has the most experience in this area.
Yes, right. So now I would like Sir Rafi to please elaborate on why he thinks that it is important for students to study environmental law.
Gee, thank you, Shafak. And hello, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Loud and clear.
Why do any type of law, frankly? And I think Sara was right. There are a lot of people who, think that the law is an easy way to make money. Well, if you think that, you're mistaken. But I mean, some people try and think that we're going to do corporate law, and some people do law because they want to do something. People want to get into human rights law. People want to practice, women's rights law. There are people who are passionate about things as well. So I wouldn't say that there's no money in environmental law. We just have two types of people who want to do something. Now, in Pakistan, environmental law practice, what I've experienced over the last 15 years is on several tiers, you could say. There is the environmental litigation under the Environment Act, which is mostly companies that have been issued notice of contraventions of environmental law. So they'll need lawyers to help them through a criminal trial where they're accused of violating environmental law. So that requires a skill set of litigation, doing criminal trial work, appreciating evidence, being able to do cross-examinations. And that's one sort of entire avenue of work. But it is also at the same time limited for a variety of reasons that I'd like to mention in just a second. But another area of work is providing legal advice to companies and to governments. Whenever companies or governments want to do projects or start initiatives, there is a lot of legal groundwork that's done to see what the regulatory framework for that particular sector is. So for instance, I've done work for cement companies, I've done work with bus rapid transport companies, I've done work with energy companies and waste companies. And each one of these is legal advice on a specific sort of regulatory issue, which is the interesting thing about environmental law. Because no two industries are the same, the regulatory atmosphere that exists for energy is completely different from the regulatory area around coal mining, or which would be completely different from how you clean up the waste in a city, which is completely different from how you provide people clean drinking water. So you develop this sort of knowledge in all these different regulatory areas, and it's this comprehensive regulatory knowledge which is the core of environmental law. And that's an area where, if you have the experience, you can provide a lot of advice to on people. I actually gave an NGO an opinion on the legal status of the black bear, the Himalayan black bear. And if nothing else, it gave me the opportunity to look up the law on bears, and it also allowed me to write an opinion called Barely Enforced. Thank you, that was a pun. So there's much work to be done. And what I was going to say in terms of litigation is, like all other sort of legal forums in the country, the Environmental Tribunal and the appellate forums, the High Court, are at times either stressed with too much work or under capacity, in that the judges don't have sufficient background education. And a parallel for that is asking somebody with a criminal background to become a banking judge. It doesn't happen overnight. So you can't just ask somebody to become an environmental judge overnight. So the courts themselves have capacity issues. The EPAs themselves have enforcement issues. And the challenge is, I suppose, to maintain the clarity of the law when there is so much sort of gray area underneath you. And so that's why we need good lawyers in the field. There's always opportunity to settle new jurisprudence, to point out new areas of law, to develop new areas of jurisprudence and practice, which haven't been developed yet. So in that way, the field is ready for bright young lawyers to come and make their claim and set the law.
Right, sir. So now I would like to move to Sir Ali Ibrahim to give his verdict on why he thinks it is important for students to study environmental law, and then we'll move to our next question. I'm sorry, sir, you'll have to unmute yourself first, and then we'll be able to hear you. I'm sorry.
So, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
So for my part, I think it's really important, because right now, I mean, in my personal opinion, it's still in its infancy stage. When we're talking about real lawyering and we're talking about environmental law, I think with regard to the population of Pakistan, they don't really regard environmental law as an immediate issue, even though, like Sarah rightly mentioned, it's the most immediate issue for our generation. But I think so. Awareness raising is one of the primary concerns that I have, because as Rafe mentioned, I've worked for corporations. I mean, that's what we do. We offer corporation advice, and we mostly offer this advice on the basis of any notice that they've received from some environmental inspector or from the agency itself on the impact, or how to reply to that, how to get out of it mostly. So for my part, in terms of litigation, there's a lot of environmental defense lawyers, but it's still, I still can't wrap my head around how to become a plaintiff in such cases and make a livelihood. So it's still as much of an issue which I find myself grappling with as the question suggests. So I think for the most part, I mean, for example, I mean, the first I heard about environmental law was hearing about Sir Rafe and his critical mass events. So, I mean, I think that is where we still are at, because that, informed me as to what the environmental law is. I did not have any idea. I mean, I had seen a few movies of Hollywood, nothing from the Pakistan side. And I think that is the prime focus where it should be. Because unless and until the population generally feels that it's a huge issue, you're not going to get a lot of people entering this particular specialization niche. So you're going to have people like me who have maybe handled like 7 or 8 litigations over the course of about 13 years and given about 20-25 opinions. So in order for me, or in order for somebody like me to focus on it as to as so it sustains my livelihood. It needs to be more in vogue. It needs to be more immediate in the mind of the populace.
Right, sir. So what I have been able to grasp from this discussion is that the study of environmental law is important because it's related to the perception of human rights. And secondly, it's important because there is lack of awareness in our society. So I'll be catering these two issues, and now I'll proceed to my next question, which is that the relationship between human rights and international environmental law is usually approached from the perspective of human rights. So the question is that how can human rights be used to implement international environmental law, or we can rephrase it like this: that what is the influence of human rights on the environmental law? So we can work like anyone can answer the question, and further on, if there will be something to add on, the esteemed panel can unmute themselves and can answer it.
So I think the starting point for that would be the Shaila Zia case in Pakistan, where the Supreme Court essentially made a connection between human rights and environmental law. They essentially said that the right of life does not mean mere opposition from death as such, but it also means to live a full life, to be free from environmental hazards and so on and so forth. And in that particular regard, even though our courts have generally been quite activist, but in that particular regard, they've made a pretty good connection between human rights and environmental law, which still to date, a lot of people especially in Europe, are it's tough to grapple with.
I think another thing that the Shaila Zia case did was that it birthed the idea of public interest litigation. And especially in the past decade or so, there has been a lot of public interest litigation as well, whereby you can always rely on Articles 9 and 14, the right to life and the dignity of life and the dignity to live in a clean environment. So there has been a lot of push, so to speak, from litigants, from even pro bono lawyers like Rafi Saab. He has filed quite a few PILs as well. So I think insofar as the one of the gaps that I see insofar as the human rights and the environmental aspect is the lack of jurisprudence that hasn't been developed as such. So I think the only way that you can have such jurisprudence being developed is if you keep on pushing the PIL front, try to force the courts to give decisions. And then, one of the benefits of that would be that it could force the government to come up with legislations which would take care, which would actually cater to the human rights aspect insofar as environmental issues is concerned.
Ravi, you want to say something, or should I jump in? Right. So I will speak more from a climate change perspective here because we've got our environmental input. And so climate change law and environmental law are actually separate. They overlap, but they're separate. Environmental law is more domestic, so it'll be more like Pakistan-related. Climate change law almost always has an international tinge to it because climate change, as you guys know, transcends borders and isn't restricted to just one particular area or jurisdiction. And this is a lovely question that you guys have asked, and one that is now making mainstream discourse across the planet, because almost in every jurisdiction where cases are being filed for to combat climate change, there is an element of human right that's being thrown into it. Even in Pakistan, हमारा 2015 में एक लाहौर हाई कोर्ट में केस आया, असगर लगारी case, which is actually a very seminal case unto itself. And I know Rafi is smiling there, but वो case जो है उसमें भी the judges said कि climate change is violating your right to life, your right to work, your even gender inequality. Because climate change impacts different, like genders differently, women and men differently. So the idea that courts are recognizing human rights and climate change and human or violations of human rights by environmental law or climate change is actually now a very pronounced one. Environmental law में सिर्फ ये फ़र्क है कि you can trace more often than not what the human, who is causing, let's say, a cement factory is causing human rights violations in Kalar Kahar, right? You can trace that. With climate change law, the reason more often than not courts become hesitant is because it's very difficult to identify who the culprit is, right? Because so in law, when you're establishing liability, you have somebody who is causing the harm, and then there's somebody who is the victim, right? And you have to create a causal chain. But with climate change, it's very difficult to create that causal chain because which factory is emitting which greenhouse gas, which is causing which farmer to suffer, right? So, and this is pretty much one of the biggest hang-ups we are having or experiencing with climate change. But that, and developing its nexus with human rights. But that's not to say that this nexus doesn't exist or it's not being explored and developed, because even the Paris Agreement now, which is the principal legal instrument globally that is covering, let's say, climate change interests, mentions human rights as climate change violating human rights. And then America has cases, European Union has cases, which whereby the courts have established that human rights and climate change or environment go hand in hand.
Right, ma'am. It was very elaborative. And then I'll like to ask Sir Rafe that what he thinks how human rights influence environmental law.
You know, one of the first people to write about human rights was H.G. Wells, just over 100 years ago. The idea of people being born with inalienable rights actually goes back to the Bill of Independence, the US Bill of Independence. But this idea of a universal declaration of human rights is really a 20th century concept. And then attained, you could say, global recognition with the UN Human Rights Declaration of 1948. And so that's where we get our, but you have to understand, human rights came in a political world right after World War II. And so they sought to protect various liberties that human civilization had trampled upon over the first 50 years of the 20th century. So they sought to protect the right to religious freedom, the right to practice your religion, the right to have political beliefs of differing opinions, the ability to work, and so on and so forth. But it came from a period of time, these rights. And really, the international environmental movement attained its sort of initiation with what's known as the 1972 United Nations Conference in Stockholm on Human Development, which is the first big international environmental law treaty. So international environmentalism or environmental law comes shortly after human rights law. And in many ways, human rights law, because it was developed before environmental law, doesn't really comprehend environmental issues the way we are beginning to see it doesn't now. We're beginning to address this now. And I don't want to, but I think it's very instructive to understand how this happened, because we tend to live in a political and social economy where the individual is paramount. Our rights are paramount. And a recognition and protection of the ecosystem and environment is actually secondary to the concerns of many legal instruments and documents around the world. When in fact, if you look back in history, human beings have been inextricably linked to the environment for so long. If you go into, and you know, you can go into stories we tell our children about jungles, poetry of Punjab and how it's centered around rivers, the mythologies of Northern Europe and how they're centered around forests and the creatures that live there. There was a symbiotic relationship that man had with nature, which is something that through industrialization and modernism has taken a back seat. We tend to ignore the environment. And that's the milieu in which human rights came about, and a system which cannot, given the climate catastrophe around it, cannot contain all of the problems of the world. We have to move beyond human rights just being political, social, and religious rights, and we need to see a world which accepts human rights and environmental rights today. We need to do this today. And I mean, I'm endlessly optimistic about environmental law, because I remember my first internship, and this is an indication of how old I am, was in the mid-1990s with Madam Asma Jahangir. And we were trying to prosecute an honor killing in the Lahore High Court. And I was shocked to find the judge of the High Court dismiss the prosecution on the grounds that the murder was a family issue. That was over 20 years ago. But you know, today in this High Court, I can tell you with a fair amount of certainty, you'll not find a judge like that at all. You'd be hard pressed to find an opinion like that. And it took a lot of very brave people, a lot of hard work over a long period of time to make that transition from judges dismissing cases and not understanding, gender-based violence and domestic violence, to an understanding today. And so similarly with environmental law, there are many judges who are protective of the environment but don't have a nuanced understanding of it. And we need to bring this mainstream understanding of environmental rights and human rights to them as quickly as possible, because we don't have 20 years, as Amir pointed out, with environmentalism.
Okay, right. So I agree that there is a need for steps to be taken immediately on the basis that we cannot wait for next 20 or 30 years in order for people to recognize environmental law as a field and to take necessary measures that are actually needed to be. So, right. Now we have, as discussed, the element of human rights. I would like to move to the second aspect that is to be considered, and that is about awareness. Now we see that even in today's world where we live, it is though the 21st century, but we do not see many lawyers currently practicing in the field of environmental law. So do you think that is because of lack of legislation in this particular field, or you think there are some other reasons for people not coming inclined towards practicing in environmental law or becoming an environmental lawyer?
Okay, so if you can allow me, I'll take this one to start off with. So I also teach environmental law to practicing lawyers at the University of Lahore. So one of the issues that I've come across is that there's hardly any awareness or the seriousness on part of lawyers to take up this field. The reason again goes back to the first question that you posed, that why should you go ahead and opt for the offering? I think the awareness has to come from the Bar Council as well. There need to be workshops being conducted for aspiring lawyers or for practicing lawyers who wish to learn more about environmental issues so that they can go back in their areas or constituencies or whatever. And once they start to identify the issues and they understand what the legislation or whatever the current legislation provides them with, I think they'll be in a better position to go ahead and practice this field of law.
Yes, sir, I certainly agree that there is lack of awareness among people. But I remember when right now I'm in my third year of my law degree. And I remember when I was in my first year, I saw Sir Rafi coming to our university and giving lecture on the importance of environmental law and how people should be inclined towards it. So it's not just about lack of awareness. I see a lot of symposium happening on this matter, but still the courts, I feel a bit restricted towards taking environmental law and giving judgments and considering it to be a global issue, as I may say. So now I would like to move on to Sir Ibrahim and then to Sir Rafi and then to Ma'am Sarah Hayat on what they think about it.
I mean, I think this is all part of a larger issue in Pakistan. Our laws are not attuned to our society. I think many sociologists have said, I mean, I think it was Durkheim who said the society has to ask for laws. You know, I mean, we have a lot of laws which don't have implementation. I believe they don't have implementation because people don't really know about them. They're not immediate to people. They're not in the minds of people as such. They don't solve issues of that are current to our times. The problem is, I mean, as I said earlier, Sir Rafe's critical mass events, and why I come to that again is, that is the kind of awareness that we need, because that is awareness for the common man. We need awareness for the common man first. The common man or the populace needs to ask. For example, if you take out the 4, 5, 6 biggest issues in Pakistan over the past 3, 4 election cycles, environment doesn't figure in them at all. So I mean, it needs to, and it can't be that you impose it on people. It has to come from the people. In order for that to happen, you need to make people aware. The problem is, you can have a lot of activist judges, you can have a lot of activist bar associations. They can ram through these environmental declarations from the outside world. The problem is, when you go to implement that, and when you talk about that with a common man, he is not going to get where you're coming from at all. So first we need to create the critical mass, and then things will flow. This idea that I should initiate a public interest litigation, and then a judge is going to create jurisprudence, and then rights are created out of that. I mean, it doesn't really work like that in practice. What works is people talk to each other about their concerns, their immediate concerns, of which the environment currently in Pakistan is not for. I mean, it could be because of ignorance. It could be because we have other concerns. I can't really point a finger on it. But that is, I think we're going about it the other way around. We need to go at it from the point of view of a common man, and then upwards and onwards onto the judiciary and onto these principles that might be enunciated then.
Right, sir. I agree that the common man does not consider it to be the issue that needs consideration at the moment. And yes, agreed that if you consider the world's biggest issues, that not just the world's, but if you consider the biggest issues that's happening in Pakistan, you won't be taking a side on environmental issues. So I completely agree.
That's not what I'm saying, though. I'm saying environmental law is one of the biggest issues, but not in the minds of the people. I mean, it's not perceived to be a big issue. That is the problem.
Yeah, yes, right. People don't take it as a issue that needs to be considered. So
I'm
moving on.
I'm going to completely agree with Ali, but I'm going to use the benefit of my experience to see if I can't cast a gaze into the future. The thing is that, you see, in 2013, there was an election. And the 2013 election mandate was fairly clear. It was that the federal government should increase the capacity of energy production in Pakistan. I mean, this is when you share away all the other daily politics, the gali galoch. It was very much an election, because we were going through an energy crisis, 2010, 11, 12. And so the country was in an economic energy crisis, and the mandate was Bijli Lao. And the response to that Bijli Lao, there were many responses, but one of them was the CPEC energy investments. And so the government of Pakistan sought to bring coal-fired energy plants that China was offering to Pakistan as a means to alleviate. Anyway, what I'm saying is that this political trend happened. The 2018 election, maybe it's too soon to actually pass through and understand what the mandate was. But I'll tell you one thing. There was a mainstream political party that used an environmental initiative as the badge on its sleeve in order to gain votes. And that was the PTI Billion Tree Tsunami. And it was the first time that in mainstream Pakistani politics, an environmental initiative, if you go back to 2013, the Sharif brothers used the bus, the Firozpur Road bus, as the leverage that they needed. The argument that, look, we're a party that does things. They used a bus to win an election. And in 2018, a political party in a major election used an environmental initiative to bolster its chances. Now, what I'm saying is that political shifts take place. We're talking about the common man and understanding. What I foresee with these energy plants, what I foresee with this sort of shift in politics, and also what I foresee on account of 5 years of consecutive smog events that have been well responded to. People know about smog, unlike other environmental events. So there is a changing appreciation of the impacts of environment, the direct linkages, for example, of industrial activity, even something as small as coal fire, crop burning, on our health. This is going to have an impact going forward. And I wouldn't be surprised that if by the 2023 or the election cycle afterwards, environment and health issues don't come to a mainstream. But while this is an optimistic point of view, I remind you, we don't have that much time. Even when we're talking about clean air and water, I don't think we have till the next election cycle. But looking forward, I do see trends changing in the future. Now, I also want to add one thing. I've done my fair share of public interest litigations, and perhaps I'd never like to see another one come my way. I know they will, and I know I'll do them. But bahut kar liye. I think we need to learn from public interest litigations in the past and going into the future. You're absolutely right. Taking these abstract questions to judges and asking them to literally make law when this is not their job. I think environmental law would be better served defending and promoting the interests of communities. So we have to find a model of environmental litigation that isn't industry defense, which is what, Ali, you and I do. We protect industry from enforcement. We need a model of litigation that can protect public rights, but can also not make us lots of money, but make lawyers enough money to cover their costs. And this is not the first time it's been done. The National Resource Defense Fund in the United States was just that. It was a collection of lawyers that got together and they wanted to prosecute. So they found a funding mechanism that would allow them to do this. And I think, we're also reaching a critical mass of environmental lawyers practicing in Pakistan to be able to try out these, you could say, second generation models of public interest litigation.
Right, sir. So now I'll be moving towards Ma'am Sara Hayat, and the question remains the same, that do you think there is lack of legislation in this particular field? And if yes, so how do we cover this gap?
Right, great. I think everybody has given a pretty comprehensive answer to begin with. But जो आपका सवाल है ना, उसके actually it's two-fold. उसमें ये है कि you're asking, one, whether there exists enough laws and enough regulations and policies in the country, and two, whether there's enough awareness about these laws in the country. To the first part, whether there are enough laws and regulations and policies and I'll speak for both environmental law and climate change law. Laws हैं, पाकिस्तान में बहुत कानून है, और कुछ काफी अच्छा कानून भी बना हुआ है, कुछ अमेरिका के छापे हैं, कुछ फ्रांस के छापे हैं, जो भी हैं, लेकिन कानून अच्छे हैं. The problem is the implementation of these laws. So when you guys come out as students and get into and enter the legal profession as lawyers, don't jump around asking for more laws. That is not the way it should work. At least I don't think so. And I'm sure the other lawyers here, and I hope they agree with me, but they are more than welcome to disagree on this front. So we do have the laws, we do have policy, we do have regulations, some not so good, some actually quite good, at least I feel so. Unki implementation, yes, is very bleak. It's not just bleak because we lack awareness, or the average person lacks awareness. In fact, the average lawyer lacks awareness about them, but also because our regulatory authorities are not functioning at maximum capacity. As Rafe pointed out, even our judges are not experts. A banking judge whose expertise is in banking law is looking at environmental cases. So the point should be कि जो already कानून available हैं, उनके ऊपर awareness आगाही create किए जाए, और फिर and that should not just be for people who are talking to each other on Zoom, or who can access Facebook or Twitter or read English newspapers. It is the common man or the man or the woman who can only actually comprehend Urdu and Punjabi, जहाँ पे ये actual awareness की ज़रूरत है. And Punjabi, I say because of I am from Punjab, is the first language that comes, but obviously all vernaculars for Pakistan. So the point remains that the existing laws should be utilized and enforced, and in order to do that, we need grassroots level awareness.
Right, ma'am. So I'll pose my next question right here. So how do you think that awareness can be made? Or a lay person or a common man living in a village, living in a city like Lahore, Pakistan, and living in some other areas of Pakistan can get involved and can get a grasp over these laws? And do you think that's a government, that's a work that the government needs to do, or it is something that can be done on an individual level. So what do you think, what approach do we need to adopt in order to make these laws implemented, and secondly to make awareness among people so that they can comply with the laws?
Right, good. I'm glad you've asked this, and I'll just go first and then everybody else can jump in. So awareness, again, I don't think is necessarily the mandate of the government. It should be in an ideal world if your government is excessively competent. Unfortunately, ours, I don't know if it meets that definition. So if people or civil society organizations or even companies or students are jumping in to fill in that gap, I think that's perfectly okay. And it's a good thing that you're doing. So if it was governments, and अब ये राफी साहब ने बड़ी एक interesting बात की, he said आम आदमी को smog का पता है, which is because number one, it's a tangible thing. Number two, it's harming them. And they can feel it, like they cough and their eyes hurt and they can't breathe and their children are suffering and falling sick. So the average person, even though the government didn't create that awareness or generate that awareness, because they are susceptible to those harms or stemming from smog, they're automatically raising awareness amongst themselves. Some right, some wrong, but they're doing it. So before we get to a point where climate and the environment, we are already at that level, but right now everybody isn't equally harmed, and soon we will be. But so before we get to that point where we're forced into recognizing the existence, the government should have mass awareness campaigns. They should deploy TV, they should have advertisements, newspapers in all languages. Even your mosques, your Maulvis should be engaged. They should be given proper narratives. कि भाई ये बात है, ये बात आपने convey करनी है. That should be monitored. If it takes religion as the opiate of our masses to get people to care, then Islam actually has a very soft corner for preserving and protecting the environment. The government should definitely dig into it. At least I feel so. I can see most of the panelists smiling. So, and apart from that, if civil society ki baat ai, talks like you guys have, like what you've arranged, I think these help. Students like Climate Action Pakistan goes to various schools, universities to raise awareness. We engage with the government, we engage with organizations and corporations. So whatever each one of us can do, even if that's just reading an article and creating self-awareness, I think that's very important. As students, don't dismiss your efforts into learning. You guys must take that extra hour out a week and learn a little. And don't wait for somebody to come and feed you information. And that's not how life will work, not when you start practicing.
Right, agreed, ma'am. So I'll move forward to Sir Ibrahim and then to Sir Amir Zafar.
I think the first thing that should be done is, I read a wonderful article by Sarah which discussed the disproportionate effects of environmental change on gender minorities. Prior to that, I had no idea that that was the case. But again, that was in an English daily. And I don't know, I think there's a very minuscule amount of population that that could have read that. So I think when we're talking about awareness, we should be talking about the general tools available to the people to make themselves aware and for us to make themselves aware. So if 90% of the population is speaking a particular language, the good starting point would be to talk in that language to those people, to talk about issues that have immediate effect. For example, smog is a wonderful example. When you see the effects of something on yourself, then you're much more attuned to or you're much more receptive to hearing about it or being made more aware about it. So generally, if somebody says "Kuda bahar na phenke," a lot of people and a lot of friends, I would have to admit, would say कि bahar फेंकने से क्या हो जाएगा कूड़ा. So the effect to their personal lives beyond कि मैं एक अच्छा इंसान हूँ या मेरी एक civic duty है, वो बहुत जरूरी है किसी भी कानून के लिए. Which is why I think in any walk of life, if you see any kind of development usually happens when there is a human need. So human need हमने create करनी है, हमने उनको aware इस तरह करना है कि it becomes immediate to them. For example, हम corruption सुनते आ रहे हैं, but it became a hot topic, a topic in which people voted on in the past 2-3 elections. Ravi Saab mentioned just energy was a topic. So you need to make this into a topic. The problem is ये जो इसको आप एक topic अगर बना देंगे, it might or might not, it might backfire because it might not be the best political ploy. So it might not make political sense for a political party to push something like this as the top 3 items on its agenda. So that is, I think, where the problem lies. कि हमारे लोगों को उनको ये हम tangibly नहीं दिखा सके कि गंदा पानी पियोगे तो क्या होगा, और हम गंदा पानी पी रहे हैं. So and then obviously there's a culture of elitism. The power rests with a few. जिन लोगों के पास power है उनको साफ पानी भी है, उनके घरों पे जो है वो air purifiers भी लगे हुए हैं. So उनको इतना ज़्यादा effect नहीं हो रहा है इस चीज़ का, and they don't want to push that agenda forward because again they're not being affected. So ये तो again, but this is more of a broader issue that concerns all walks of life in Pakistan.
Acha, so initially I think the main responsibility lies with the government to spread awareness, because obviously we are already paying our taxes, so this is one of the responsibilities that they should take and spread awareness. So this is one thing that we are doing at the Lahore Waste Management Company, where I'm currently serving as a director as well. What we've done is that we send out awareness teams to different localities all over the Lahore district. वैन में जो है 5-6 हमारे पब्लिक एंगेजमेंट ऑफिसर्स चले जाते हैं. दे गो टू डिफरेंट स्कूल्स, दे गो टू डिफरेंट लोकेलिटीज. वो अब फ्लायर्स उधर बांटते हैं. स्कूल में जाके वो बच्चों को सिखाते हैं जी कि आप अपना एनवायरनमेंट गंदा ना करें, कूड़ा जो है आप डब्बों में फेंकें, कि कूड़े से आपके नेगेटिव हेल्थ इफेक्ट्स क्या हो सकते हैं. So these are some of the things that the concerned departments should be doing all over Pakistan. Because civil society obviously does have its limitations as well, I think. Jitni funding government ke paas hai, obviously I worked with Rafi Saab and Sara for Climate Action PK as well. And trust me, it's not easy at all to arrange these types of walks. We had to work for, I think, 6-7 months in advance in order to come up with that extremely successful climate action event. Lekin it is very important to keep this thing up in a very sustained manner, and this is where I personally believe that the government should step in and educate people on environmental issues.
Look, the definition of environment is actually very wide, legally speaking. It's not just planting trees or cleaning the water or dealing with plastic or cleaning up the waste. It really is, the definition is air, water, land, I think, the ecosystem and ecological relationships, all organic and inorganic matter. But then beyond that, it also is roads, facilities and works, social and economic conditions affecting community life, and anything that interconnects all of these things. So I think when we talk about raising awareness, it should not just be raising awareness of individual responsibilities, which is what we're talking about, but also, and I think more importantly, raising awareness of what your rights are. Because if I look at things, Pakistanis don't pollute equally. You and I, who have electricity and have access to a car, being more affluent, will pollute on multiples more than what we are referring to as the common man, who will actually, in fact, pollute very little. And this affluence scale can also be used to test against other. We as individuals, even if we drive an SUV, which is far more polluting than driving a regular automobile, will be nothing in comparison to somebody who produces somebody who produces cement through coal. And there are at least 3 or 4 cement plants in Pakistan that do just that. They are the major polluters. And it's their majority pollution that's impacting the majority of the people. It's a very small number of people that do the majority of the resource consumption and a majority of the pollution. So in many ways, while it's very important to remember what our responsibilities and our municipal responsibilities of keeping the street clean or turning the tap off when we are brushing our teeth, these are very important. But these individual actions pale in comparison to the types of pollution we see through the systems of capitalism and consumerism and the fossil fuel economy, which happens in multiples. I think the awareness we need to spread is the awareness of just how wide the definition of environment is, and the fact that our environmental law essentially prohibits any adverse environment effect or anything adverse to our environment. And this could be anything from polluting the air because you don't have emissions control devices, to polluting water, to incidentally radio waves emitted by BTS towers that provide our mobile phone signals. That's also a form of environmental pollution. But when you make people aware of the fact that they have these rights, that wireless tower is radiating electromagnetic signals which are known to cause cancer in people, and that we have regulations, in fact, that such stations not be constructed, for example, within 250 feet of a school, for example, and other such restrictions. When you make people aware of what their rights are in the environment, they'll push back. Because the experience of environmental law around the world has not been one of countries and people who have been aware of their rights, or of governments that have been successful in making their communities aware. That's not been the experience of environmental law. The growth of environmental law has almost always been local communities, and interestingly, mostly mothers in local communities fighting back against these forces of capitalism and consumerism, these industries that are exploiting resources and pollution, and demanding from them to take a fraction of their profits and reduce the environmental pollution that's harming their communities. Though it has been individual action and enforcement of rights that has led to environmental law spreading around the world.
Right, sir. So since I'm just going to have the last question, because we are almost done with our time, and that I think would be the best possible option would be to ask it from Sir Rafe Alam, because he himself said that he has been in the profession for last 20 years and there is no one that could answer it best. So sir, what were the personally, what were the biggest barriers or the challenges you faced while becoming an environmental lawyer? And secondly, for fresh law graduates who are going to enter into the profession, what do you think there are any specific law firms that do cater this area of law or practice on environmental strategies?
Well, I understand that I am a able-bodied Sunni male living in Punjab and in Lahore. So in many ways, I'm at the apex of the pyramid of privilege here in Pakistan. So please don't ask me of the difficulties I faced. I had a relatively easy ride throughout all of this. And I'll leave it for others to be able, I mean, what am I going to say? You know, that I wasn't paid enough. That's not a large enough issue that I had to contend with, really. But what I would advise people who are entering into the law profession, and just a couple of quick bits of advice. The first is have a plan, have a 5-year plan. Try and figure out where you want to be 5 years from now, and then spend every day working towards that. Maybe you want your own law firm. Maybe you want to be a Supreme Court lawyer. Those are two separate paths. They involve separate skill sets. What I'm saying is have a 5-year plan and then stick to it. And when you finish your 5-year plan, have another 5-year plan. The second thing I'll say is, you know, when you start working in law in Pakistan, you'll probably start working with a senior or a firm in a chamber. Please don't think it will be your only firm or senior or chamber. Please understand that there is a high turnover here, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad lawyer. It just means that this profession sees a lot of turnover. Don't take it personally. Stick to the 5-year plan, and do also try and get different experience as you move up and around the sort of legal ladder, so to speak. Try different chambers, try different lawyers, try different seniors who have different skill sets that match the 5-year plan that you want.
I'll just add one thing over here. My whatever I learned insofar as environmental law is due to I got introduced to environmental law thanks to Rafi Saab. I think he's at the apex of environmental laws in Pakistan. If one wants to learn actual environmental laws, their implementation, the pros and cons, I think there is nobody better than Rafi Saab to teach you that.
Thank you, sir. So now, Sir Ali Ibrahim, if you could talk to us about the challenges you faced personally in your career. Sir, please, you'll have to unmute yourself first.
So I don't really categorize myself as an environmental lawyer because, I mean, I sustain my livelihood through the practice of law, which is commercial and civil law. Every time I've done any environmental law related work, it has been for a corporate or a civil client. Hardly ever has there been a case where, I mean, if a friend of mine asks me, they're constructing this, what rights do I have? I'll give an individual assessment of that situation. But I won't. I think I'd leave it to people like Sir Rafe, Mr. Amir, and Ms. Hayat to answer that, because they are far better placed than I am to answer the question as to what challenges an environmental lawyer faces, because I categorize myself more as a general lawyer.
Okay, that's very kind of you. So now we'll move to Ma'am Sara Hayat. And ma'am, what were the challenges or the barriers you faced in your early career?
Gee, and I think we're quite short on time, so I'll make this quick. So I'm actually also not mainstream environmental law. I'm very much climate change law. But as a female, I can give in some input here. I hope that there are going to be multiple girls who will join the profession. We need it very much. And don't be discouraged if your families tell you कि शादी नहीं कोई करेगा या बहुत सख्त हो जाओगे or you're going to become really aggressive, or trust me, we all got it, we've all survived it. But what I do want to add here is that एक तो राफे साहब gave you splendid advice. 5-year plan एक बहुत अच्छी चीज है to have in all avenues of life. उस plan में थोड़ी सी flexibility जरूर रखिएगा. When I entered this profession, I thought, you know what, and I was being picked by top tier law firms. I thought I had, like I would jump from one law firm to the other within minutes, and I have worked at multiple law firms in the city, but it just wasn't for me, So, and I didn't stand there and say, look, I've put in this kind of work, I've put in these kind of hours, I'm going to stick to mainstream law, I'm going to draft these damned agreements. No, I wanted to work in climate change. I moved towards climate change. So I kept some flexibility. एक ये बात जरूर रखिए. दूसरा, when Rafe Saab said कि explore different areas of law, definitely explore different areas of law. Because in Pakistan, a chamber generally doesn't niche into any one particular, most chambers don't niche into any one area of law. So when you enter practice, you'll be doing litigation, you'll be doing property, you'll be doing family, you'll be doing XYZ, barring criminal, most law firms will do everything. So in that, when you're in that position, make sure you take as much and go out and grab that opportunity. Tell your seniors you want to take this case, you want to take this agreement, so that you have, by the end of 2-3 years, a better sense of what works for you, what doesn't tire you, what you want to pursue, because your work shouldn't feel like work all the time. And trust me, when you're working in an area which you enjoy, you're willing to give your Sundays and Saturday evenings to it. Something, by the way, if you're entering this profession, get ready for. अच्छा, ये हो गई बात. दूसरी बात ये हो गई, as a female, आपको बड़े challenges आएंगे. And just be prepared for it. If you're in court, somebody will turn around and tell you your uniform is not right, आपका दुपट्टा सही नहीं है. Somebody will. It happens to all of us. Just be prepared for it. If you are going to a government office, I think that most people sitting in our ministry know less about climate change law than I know, because I've studied it and because I pursue it as a passion along with my work. But they don't want to listen to me. Some will even tell me, "Aap bahut young lagti hain, madam." You know what? Just be prepared for it. It's going to come your way. Don't give up. Tisri baat ye ho gayi, you will meet some lawyers who are going to make you uncomfortable. Be careful. Avoid unnecessary situations. Don't end up staying too late at law firms. But that doesn't mean that you don't work, you don't give in your best. Choose your bosses carefully. Choose your associates and your seniors carefully. And just you know what, like, try to have fun in this profession. This profession is so taxing that most of us, most lawyers burn out, most girls burn out. um, and you know, you just like, nahi, मैं इतनी थक जाती हूँ. And it happened to me also, by the way. Like, you know, I just like, no, I have no social life, no, you know what, I can't even go to the gym, XYZ. But no, like, you gotta create your own time, you gotta create your own sort of work palette or whatever. And that will come. Shuru mein to you are going to be an associate, and that requires hard work, and you are going to be somebody's slave for all intents and purposes. But then, you know, you get the chance to put together your own schedule, and you make your own niche in this area. And so what I'm going to really tell girls and female students who are going to be entering this profession is, just don't give up in it. If you want to do it, if you can do it, there are some very good female lawyers. There is work for females. And just like, resist people who tell you that you can't have a family and be in this profession, and that, you know, it's going to make you very aggressive or whatever. Because I think any girl you will speak to who's in this profession gets this. But you can sustain some kind of balance.
One advice that I'd like to give as well is, there's a difference between a bada vakil and an acha vakil. Try to be the acha vakil.
Yeah.
That's basically, I mean, adding to what Sarafe and Sara said, that's just my bit. Be the acha vakil. Don't try to be the bada vakil.
Yeah. Okay, certainly, yes. And ma'am, I do agree with what you have said. Like, these are the problems that we faced. I don't consider myself into be practice, but since the 2 or 3 times I have visited the Lahore High Court for a certain conference or something, people do tell you, do not wear Western uniform or do wear Eastern uniform or something like that sort. But I don't think that is a barrier actually for women to not enter into this legal profession. And with the end of this, I'm very glad and very thankful for the esteemed panel that all of you took out time and spoke on the issue that's very pertinent and that's very important. And thank you so much for being here and for giving your time. And thank you.
Thank you for having us.
I'm really grateful for having this panel with us today. Now we'd like to move to the closing ceremony, and we have Mr. Taimur Malik with us. Sir, can you hear me?
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for organizing this, and thank you for the panelists who are there. I think Rafi may have left already, but I wanted to say, as the senior most person here, he's always been very supportive of such discussions and sessions. I heard what Sarah had to say towards the end, and you know, if anything, the number of female participants of this session is very encouraging. So hopefully, you know, that trend will continue. I must say that the Kinnaid Nadra Hassan Law School Law Department at Kinnaid is doing an excellent job on that. But again, most of all, thank you to the students who organized this, and I hope they all benefited from the 3 sessions that took place today. And hopefully the sessions, the recordings will be uploaded on other platforms as well, so that other students can benefit from this as well. So I think somebody needs to go on mute, but other than that, all great. Thank you, Amir, thank you, Ali Ibrahim, and thank you, Sarah, for taking part in this. This is a group of you know, aspiring parliamentarians who also perhaps are being trained as lawyers. But the reason that they are all in this group is not because they want to just pursue law, but they want to be more than just lawyers, so which is also very, very, very good. And hope they will enter bar politics as well and help reform it over time. You know, the Punjab bar elections have just taken place yesterday. Amir played a big role in them, but hopefully, you know, the candidates who have been elected this time will say no to the strike culture and all that, so that we can leave a better impression. So this is the thing, Taimur, this is one of the things, I'm glad that you mentioned it. So one of the things that we ensured with our list of, or our slate of candidates, was that they will be providing with legal education through the Punjab Bar Council. I think that is extremely important. And I hope that today we persuaded quite a few of you to pursue environmental law. जैसे भी बात हो रही थी कि वकील बहुत कम है और जगह बहुत ज़्यादा है और काम भी बहुत ज़्यादा है, तो आई होप कि आप लोग इसको परसू भी करेंगे और तैमूर भाई इसको थोड़ा और पुश भी देंगे कि मजीद वकील environmental law को pursue करें.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when Eamon and the team were discussing names for this panel, it was difficult to find lawyers with not just an interest but some expertise in this area, right? So glad you could all make it. ये इस तरह के sessions होते रहते हैं. The group is it can be more interactive, and I hope this is to the speakers that hope you will join for future sessions as well. And thank you once again.
Thank you.
Eamon,
over to you, Ji.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Ji.
Conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.
Everyone. Bye.